The family entered a dusty antique shop. The shelves were lined with strange mechanical toys and dolls with porcelain faces. George's gaze was drawn to a glass display case in the corner. Behind the glass sat an old vintage Labubu toy made of paper mache, its paint cracked and peeling. The shop owner took out a key and opened the case. He handed the toy to George with the words, "She's been waiting just for you." One of its glass eyes was cracked. From the fissure, a small black moth slowly crawled out and landed on George's finger. As soon as George took hold of the Labubu, all the mechanical toys in the shop simultaneously turned their heads toward him. Their eyes gleamed in the dim light. From the floor vent of the shop, a thick fog began to pour out, smelling of dust and old books. The fog thickened, taking the shapes of fantastical beings with oversized heads and smiles that resembled Labubus. The family left the shop and called an elevator in a nearby abandoned office building. The elevator doors screeched open. Inside, the cabin was lined with worn velvet. The panel buttons had been replaced with small carved Labubu figurines of different colors. The elevator descended, but instead of the usual sound, a distorted children's melody played. George clutched the vintage Labubu tightly. Suddenly, the light in the elevator went out. When it flickered back on, a translucent figure of a girl was standing in the corner, holding a worn Labubu toy of her own. The girl's figure pointed to the control panel. One of the figurine buttons, a blood-red Labubu, glowed with an unnatural light. The elevator jerked to a stop. The doors opened into absolute darkness. From the void, thin tendrils of compressed dust reached inside. The Labubu in George's hands began to vibrate. From its cracked eye spilled black dust, which swirled in the air, forming intricate patterns. The family stepped out of the elevator into a vast underground chamber. It was a labyrinth of glass display cases, but instead of exhibits, thousands of Labubu figurines stood inside. Every figurine in the cases turned their heads toward the family. Their eyes glowed with a soft light, illuminating the path deeper into the labyrinth. At the labyrinth's center stood an installation, a giant nest woven from old newspapers, photographs, and threads, where a fabric Labubu sat. Its mouth had been crudely sewn shut with thick stitches, but one by one the threads began to snap, revealing sharp teeth made of yellowed buttons. George approached the nest. The vintage toy in his hands reached out toward the larger Labubu. From all the cases, faint whispers in forgotten languages began to rise. The family froze inside the glass displays, transformed into perfect porcelain figurines with wide, astonished eyes. George sat at the heart of the nest, clutching his Labubu, as his skin slowly took on the texture of papier-mâché. The great Labubu smiled, its button teeth glinting in the glow of the displays. The elevator was gone, leaving only a wall covered in carved figurines. Sunny day. Daddy Pig was filming his family with a new wide-angle phone. He looked at the screen. At the very edge of the frame, a tall, dark figure was visible. Daddy showed Peppa the photo. The picture was normal, but at the edge, there was a sharp, blurry spot with a couple of bright red dots. He looked at the screen again. The entire screen was filled with a huge, distorted face. Pale, rubbery skin, a huge mouth with tiny, sharp teeth, red eyes. Daddy, horrified, dropped the phone. On the shattered screen appeared the same creepy face, laughing. Black, oily liquid was flowing from the screen. The family froze, looking toward the forest. A tall figure, very thin, long limbs like a spider's, an oversized head with red eyes and a wide grin. Black liquid dripped from its hands onto the grass. The family ran home. The figure took its first step. A black puddle from the broken phone began to grow rapidly. Daddy slammed the front door shut. Peppa and George pressed against Daddy. The terrifying face of the monster was in the window. Black liquid that Daddy accidentally stepped in quickly spread across the living room floor. It contained bubbles and shadows as if something alive was inside. Daddy pulled the children toward the basement stairs. Black liquid had already covered half of the floor. George tripped. Daddy caught him. From the stairs, black liquid was flowing. Every house has things better left untouched. But sometimes they touch you first. Peppa walked, clutching the rabbit tightly. At the end of the hallway, a closed, dark door. A black puddle seeped from underneath it. Bare footprints led inside. It was waiting, remembering every step. Peppa stood on the threshold. Deep inside loomed a tall figure, the master, with two glowing eyes. This was the room of forgotten things, and he was its keeper. Peppa ran, stumbling. Black tendrils grabbed her ankle. "Run!" But the house had already decided her fate. The rabbit lay on the floor, its mouth ripped open. "We played with your friend. Now it's your turn." The master stood behind Peppa, his steam-like tendrils coiling around her neck. Black vapor poured from her snout, revealing a face within. "Stay. Forever." Peppa hid behind a bush. From the shadows, branch-like tentacles reached out. The garden remembers everyone who played here, and everyone who stayed. Peppa's dress lies empty. Beside it, a crown. Only the shell remains. On the swing sits a Peppa doll, a plastic smile, black bead eyes. A new toy for the collection. Black strings stretch from her head and hands toward the house. The strings are taut. The stage is set. On the window, a bloody message. "Enter your move. Play with us." Peppa entered a narrow shop filled with dust and old things. On a shelf stood a glass icicle with a tiny Labubu figurine frozen inside it. The label read, "Make a wish. Break it." Peppa bought it and made her wish.
I want George to stop crying.
She shattered the icicle on the floor. At that moment, dead silence fell over the house. Peppa returned home. George sat on the rug, not crying anymore. His eyes turned glassy, empty. The next day, Peppa wanted ice cream. By morning, the fridge was packed to capacity, but it was made of worms moving in bright cups. Once, there was too much noise in the house, and Peppa longed for silence. Her parents opened their mouths, but no sound came out. Peppa was frightened. In the corner of the room appeared a Labubu toy. It had grown to ceiling height. Its crimson smile moved as if alive.
Your new wish. I'm listening.
Peppa ran outside, clutching a shard of icicle in her fist, and made her last wish.
Bring everything back as it was.
A huge Labubu appeared before her, its body made of broken glass and shining brightly in fragments. It laughed silently.
You can't cancel trends, but you can lead them.
George stepped out of the shadows. His glassy eyes reflected the moonlight. He raised his hand and pointed at Peppa. His mouth opened wide and a swarm of glass shards burst forth from it, each carrying inside tiny Labubus. They sang in a thin chorus as they merged into Peppa's skin. She tried to shake them off, but they stuck and grew inside her skin. Her skin hardened into transparent glass. Their last scream froze in her throat into a quiet chime like shattering crystal.